Hello friends, how are you? Welcome to the Japan Study Center. Today we are going to see the chapter of geography, and what is our topic today? Insolation and temperature. There is a most important chapter and important point is arrive here. Insolation. What do you mean to hear the insolation? The insolation is as known as solar radiation. The solar radiation definition here. The sun is the primary source of energy on the earth. You know that the sun is the primary source of energy on the earth, and this energy is radiated in all direction into space through the short waves. This is known as the solar radiation. You understand what is solar radiation? Solar radiation in this energy is radiated in all direction into space through the short wave, and this is known as the solar radiation. Only 2 billions are 2 unit of energy out of the 1 billion unit of their energy radiated by the sun of the total solar radiation and reach the earth as a surface. And this small proportion of the solar radiation is of a great importance as it is the only a major source of energy on the earth from most of the physical and biological phenomena. Incoming solar radiation through the short wave is termed as a insolation. The amount of insolation received on the Earth's surface is far less than that is radiated from the sun because of the small size of the Earth, and it is a distance from the sun. Moreover, water vapor, dust particles, ozone and other gases present in the atmosphere absorb a small amount of insolation. There is an important line. There are water vapor, dust particle, ozone and other gases present in the atmosphere absorb a small amount of insolation. And the point, sun is the primary source of energy of the earth. Okay, and insolation is the incoming solar radiation. The next year, factors influencing to the insolation. The amount of insolation received on the earth as a surface is not uniform everywhere. It is varied from place to place and from time to time. You know that it is various from place to place and from a time to time. The tropical zone is receive the maximum annual insolation. In the gradually decrease to about the pole, insolation is more in a summer and less in a winter. There is important insolation is more in a summer and less in a winter. The following factor influence amount of the insolation received. The first year, the angle of incidence. The angle of incidence, duration of the day, daily sunlight period, and transparency of the atmosphere. The point here, the angle of incidence. The angle of incidence is important. Seeing the earth as a round, the sun as a ray strike the surface of at a different angle at a different place. The angle formed by the sun as a ray with the transit of the earth circle. Here the point is called angle of incidence. What is the angle of incidence? Since the earth is round, the sun as a ray strike their surface at a different angle, a different place. The angle formed by the sun as a ray with the transit of the earth as a circle at the point is called angle of incidence. Its influence their insolation is a two-way. There is important influence their insolation is a two-way. First, when the sun is almost overhead. The sun is almost overhead and the ray of the sun are vertically. Vertically is important. The angle of the incidence is a large enough there concentrate in the small area given a more amount of insolation at that place. If the sun as a ray or the oblique angle of incidence is smaller and sun as a ray has to be heat up a great area, resulting in the less amount of the insolation received there. And secondary, the sun as a ray with a small angle transfer more of the atmosphere than the ray striking at the large angle. And the longer the path of the sun's ray and greater is the amount of the deflection and absorption of the heat by atmosphere. As a result, the intensities of the insolation at a place is use. That is the most important here. As a result, the intensities of the insolation at a place is a less. And important here, this diagram, the effect of angle of incidence is a insolation. There is a most important diagram show your screen. There is a effect of the angle of incidence. There is important. The sun is the angle here. Here show the angle of atmosphere and the zero is the sun rays and perpendicular to here. And perpendicular ray is the there is go to this side and there are incidence on isolation. Second here, the duration of the day. The duration of the day the varies from place to place and season to season. It is decide the amount of the insolation received on the earth as a surface. The longer the duration of the day, the greater is there is amount of insolation received. Conversely, the shorter the duration of their day lead to the receptive of the less insolation. And third point here, transparency of the atmosphere. Transparency of the atmosphere is an important point. The transparency of the atmosphere also determines the amount of insolation reaching the earth as a surface. The transparent depend upon to the cloud cover, it is a thickness, dust particles and water vapors. As they reflect, absorb or transmit insulations and things cloudily hinder their insulation to be reach the earth while the clear sky help it to reach the surface. The water vapor absorb to insulation and resulting in the less amount of the insulation reaching their surface. The next here, heating and cooling of atmosphere. There is an important phenomenon here. The heating and cooling of the atmosphere. Sun is the ultimate is a source of atmospheric heat and energy, but its effect is not direct. For example, as we climb a mountain or ascended in their atmosphere, temperature become slightly lower rather than to higher as we might expect. And this is because of the mechanism of heating the atmosphere is not a simple and there are four heating processes directly responsible for the heating the atmosphere and they are radiation, conductions, convections and advections. There is a most important point here, heating and cooling the atmosphere. There is a 4 point is the most important. The first point here, radiation. The radiation is the process by which the solar energy reaches the earth and the earth loses energy to the outer space. When the source of heat transmits the heat directly to an object through the heat waves, it is known as the radiation process. In this process, heat travels through their empty space. The waste amount of the heat energy coming to the and leaving the earth is in the form of radiation. The following fact about the radiation are nothing. The first effect here, all the objects whether hot or cold emit radiate energy continuously. And second here, hotter is the object radiate a more energy per unit area than colder object. And third here, temperature of on the object determine the wavelength of radiation. The temperature and wavelength are inversely is radiated. The hotter the object, shorter is the length of the wave. And fourth point here, insulation is reaches the earth as a surface in a short waves and heat is the radiated from the earth is a longer wave. That is important. You will be amused to be now that is atmosphere is a transparent to be short waves and we quick to the longer wave. Hence the energy is leaving their earth as a surface and terrestrial or radiation heat up to the atmosphere more than the incoming solar radiation and insolation. That is important. The next here is a conductions. Conduction is here when the two objects of a unequal temperature come in contact with each other. The heat energy flow from to the warmer object to the colder object. There is an important a warmer's object to the cooler's object, and this process of heat transfer is known as a conduction. You know that each other there is the when the two objects are unequal temperature is a unequal temperature come in contact with each other. The heat energy flow from to the warmer object to the colder object. The warm object to the colder object is a process. The heat transfer is known as the conduction, and this flow is continued till the temperature of the both the object become equal or the contact is broken. The conductions in the atmosphere occur at the zone of the contact between the atmosphere and earth as a surface. However, this is a minor method of the heat transfer in a term of the warming their atmosphere, since it is only affect the air close to the earth as a surface. The next third point, convection. The convection is a transfer of heat by movement of a mass or substance from one place to another. Generally, vertical is called convection. You know that the transfer of heat by the movement of a mass or a substance from one place to another, or generally is a vertically is called convection. And this air of the lower layer of the atmosphere get heated either by their earth as a radiation or by the conduction. The heatings of the air lead to be expansion. Its density is decreasing and it moves upward. And continually ascent of the heated air creates a vacuum in the lower layers of the atmosphere. As a consequence, is a cooler air come down and fill the vacuum, leading to be a convection. And the cycling movement associated with their convectionally process in atmosphere transfer heat from to the lower layer to the upper layer and heat up to the atmosphere. The fourth air, advection. The wind carry of the temperature of one place to another. There is a factor, it is the most important. Wind has a carry to temperature of the one place to another. The temperature of place will be rise if it is less on the path of the winds is coming from a warmer regions. The temperature will be fall if the place lies on the path of the winds is blowing from the cold region. And this process of the horizontal transport of heat by wind is known as the advection. That is the most important point for air. The next topic is the most important here, a heat buzzard. That is the most important topic according to the chapter insolation and temperature. The heat buzzard. The insolation is made up to the energy transmitted directly through the atmosphere and scattering energy. Insolation is the amount of the solar radiation that reaches the earth as a surface through the short wave. The earth also irradiated heat energy like all other hot objects. This is known as the terrestrial radiation. That is called to the terrestrial radiation. The earth is also radiate the heat energy like all other is a hot object. This is known as the terrestrial radiation. The annual mean of temperature on the surface of the earth is a constant. It has been possible because of the balance between insolation and terrestrial radiation. And this balance is termed as the heat buzzard of the earth. Here show the diagram. The heat buzzard is a balance between the insolations and terrestrial radiation. There is a most important diagram shown in this picture. Atmosphere, space, incoming radiation and the total reflected radiation and the absorbed the earth here and outgoing radiation related to the atmosphere. There is a most important here diagram, the heat buzzard. Let us suppose that the total heat is incoming solar radiation or received at the top of the atmosphere is 100 unit. Roughly 35 units of it are reflected back into space. That is important. That is atmosphere is top of the 100 unit, but roughly 35 units of are reflected back into space. even before the reaching the surface of the earth. Out of this, the 35 unit is a 6 unit are deflected back to the space from the top of the atmosphere. 27 unit deflected by the cloud and 2 unit from to the snow and the ice is a covered surface. There is important here. Out of the remaining 65 unit is 135, only 51 unit reach the earth as a surface and 40 unit are absorbed by the various gases. They are dust particle, water vapor and the atmosphere. There is a most important point here. The earth is a turned or radiated back to 51 unit in the form of terrestrial radiation. Out of this 51 unit of terrestrial radiation and 34 unit are absorbed by their atmosphere and the remaining 70 unit directly go to the space. The atmosphere also radiated to the 48 unit, the 14 unit of incoming radiation and 34 unit of the outgoing radiation is absorbed by it and back to space. Thus, the 65 unit of solar radiation entering the atmosphere are reflected back into the space. And this amount of the incoming and outgoing radiation a way to maintain the balance of the heat on the surface of the earth. And the point here, the heat budget is a balance between two insolation is the incoming solar radiation and terrestrial radiation. There is an important point here. Through their earth is a wall maintenance balance between to the incoming solar radiation and outgoing terrestrial radiation. But this is not true. But we observe at a different latitudes. As previously is discussed, the amount of insolation is received is directly related to the latitudes. In the tropicals is a regional, the amount of insolations is there higher than to the amount of terrestrial radiation. Hence, there it is the reason of the surplus heat. In the polar region, the heat gain in a less than the heat loss. Hence, it is the reason of the defect of heat, and thus the insolations is a create an imbalance of the heat at a different altitude. And this is been to the nullified to some extent by the winds and ocean current, and which transfer heat from surplus heat region to the deficit or heat region, and this is commonly known as the longitudinal heat balance. So here show the most important diagram here, longitudinal heat balance. There is a show of equator and north pole and incomings and the surplus and the deficit and outgoing. There is the most important longitudinal heat balance show in this diagram. There is important here. So our next important topic arrive here, global warming. Global warming is the most important topic here. The global warming is one of the major environmental problem our earth is facing. That is important here. Global warming is one of the major environment problem our earth facing, and scientists see it is a close association with the depletion of the stratospheric ozone layer and the increasing the atmospheric carbon dioxide. That is important. The scientists observe here the depletion and the stratospheric ozone layer is increasing the atmospheric carbon dioxide. As you know that the upper portions of the stratosphere contain a layer of the ozone gas. The ozone is capable of the absorbing a large amount of sun as a ultraviolet radiation, thus the preventing it from the reaching the earth as a surface. Scientists have realized that is the thickness of the ozone layer is the reducing, and this is a distribution of the balance of the gas in the atmosphere is increasing the amount of the ultraviolet radiation reaching the earth. You know that there is the most important here. The ozone is capable of absorbing to the large amount of sun ultraviolet radiation, thus preventing it from reaching the earth's surface. And scientists have realized that is the thickness of the ozone layer is the reducing. The ultraviolet radiation is responsible for the increasing to the global temperature of the Earth's surface. Besides, it can be cerebral burn human beings as a skin, increase the incidence of the skin cancer, destroy contain microscopy from of life and damage plant. That is important for the ultraviolet here ray, the radiation, and there is a main effect here are skin cancer, destroy content of microscope from and the damage of plant and the motia bin. There is the gradually is a increasing in the carbon dioxide content of the atmosphere. It is a estimate that the carbon is a dioxide is the content of atmosphere has increasing 25% in the last hundreds year. Carbon dioxide allowed to the insulation to the pass through the but absorbing tertiary radiation. Increase of the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere has to be effect of the rising of the atmospheric temperature. It is estimated that the temperature of atmosphere has increased by about 0.5% in the last 1000 year. You know that there is the last of 0.5 Celsius in the last 1000 year. The atmosphere is increasing of temperature. The large scale of deforestation and fossil fuel burning, their reason, and burning of the garbage and combustion of the process in the factories and volcanic eruptions are some of the factors responsible for the increasing of the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. There is a most important topic here. If the depletion of the ozone layer and the increasing in the carbon dioxide content of continue, the time would be a come when the temperature of the atmosphere will be rise to be a extent that is would be a melt polar ice cap and increasing the sea level and causing to the submergence of coastal region and island. The phenomenon of the worldwide increasing of atmospheric temperature due to depletion of the ozone layer and the increasing of carbon dioxide content is known as the global warming. You know that what is the global warming? The global warming is a rising for the ice cap, increasing the sea level and the submergence of the coastal region. There is the effect. And there is the global warming is the definition here. The phenomena of would be wild of increasing of atmospheric temperature due to the depletion of the ozone layer and the increasing of carbon dioxide content is known as the global warming. There is a 2 point here is the most important for the exam view. The longitudinal heat balance is a transfer of heat from the lower to the higher altitude and by the winds and oceans current to be counter the imbalance created by the isolation at the different latitudes. And here the next point, the global warming is the worldwide is an increasing of the atmospheric temperature due to depletion of the ozone layer and it is the increasing of the carbon dioxide content. There is important here. Next topic is the most important here, temperature and its distribution. There is the most important topic here, the temperatures and its distribution. Temperature is indicated there is relative to degrees of the heat of a substance and heat is there is energy which is a make to things or object is hot. While the temperature is a measuring there is a intensity of heat and though there is a quite a distinct from each other. Yet heat and the temperatures are closely related to the because gain and loss of the heat necessary to the rise of lower end temperature. Important here, you know that the gain and loss of the heat is a necessary to the rise or lower to the temperature. The Celsius is a scale is named after the is a Swedish astronomer is Andreas Celsius. He is associated to the internationally by scientists for the reporting to air temperature. There is a most important here. The given of Celsius here, Andreas Celsius is accepted to international by scientists and the air temperature. The historical temperature record of the several English-speaking countries include the value on the Fahrenheit scale. The Fahrenheit temperature may be converted to there is a Celsius equivalent by the formula. The relation here, Fahrenheit and Celsius, there is Celsius equal to 5/9 is F minus 32. There is a most important relation here, the Celsius and Fahrenheit change. Moreover, different in temperature determine their direction of flow of the heat and this we can understand by the studying of temperature distribution. Okay. The distribution of temperature is a various both horizontal and vertically and let us study it is under the horizontal distribution of temperature and the vertical distribution of temperature. The first I here the horizontal distribution of temperature, see that. The horizontal distribution of temperature here, distribution of temperature across the latitude over of the surface of the earth is called horizontal distribution. On the map, the horizontal distribution of temperature is commonly shown by the isotherms. Line are connected to a point that is have equal temperature. On the isotherm is made by the two words iso and therm. Is iso mean the equal and term means is a temperature. If you study on the isothermal map, you will be find that the distribution of temperature is uneven. Uneven, there is the most important here. The important here the factor responsible for the uneven distribution of temperature as follow. There is the most important here the factor responsible for the uneven distribution of temperature. The first here latitude, land and sea contract and relief and attitudes, ocean currents, wind, vegetation cover, nature of the soil and slope and the sap. There is the most important, I repeat again, the factor of temperature. There is a attitude, land and sea contract and relief and attitudes, ocean current, winds, vegetation cover, nature of the soil and slope and sap. There is a most important factor here. Note down your notebook. And here the brief account of the factor of temperature. The first here latitude. You have already studied under to the insolations, that is the angle of incidence goes on a decreasing from a equator to about to the pole. Higher the angle of incidence, the higher is the temperature. There is important here. Higher the angle of incidence, the higher of the temperature. And lower angle of incidence lead to be a lower of temperature. It is because of this is that higher temperature are found in the tropical region and they generally decrease at the considerable rate toward the pole. Temperature is below freezing point near the pole almost throughout the year. You know that is the most important point. The generally decrease of considerable rate toward the pole. Temperature is below the freezing point. Where? Near the pole of almost through the year. And next here, land and sea contrast. There is an important here point. Land and sea contrast affect the temperature to a great extent. The land gets heated more rapidly and to a great degrees than but as the water due to sunshine. It is also cooled down more rapidly than water is during night. Hence, the temperature is relatively highly on land during the daytime and it is the high in the water during night. You know that there is important here. The land is during daytime and the higher in the water during the night. The higher on the land during the daytime and the higher in the water during the night time. In the same way, there are the seasonal contrasts in the temperature. During the summer, the air above land has a higher temperature than the ocean. During the summer, the air above the land and the higher temperature than to the ocean. But the air above the ocean get a higher temperature than the land masses in a winter. Notwithstanding their great contrast between land and the water surface, there are difference in the rate of the heating of different land surface. A snow is covering land as a in a polar area is warm. It's very slowly because of their large amount of the reflection of the solar energy. You know that the notwithstanding their greater contrast between the land and the water surface, there are different in the rate of the heating of different land surface. A snow covered land as in a polar area warm is very slowly because of the large amount of reflection of solar energy. A vegetation covered land does not be get exclusively is heated because a great amount of the insulation is used in evaporating water from the plant. Important here, a vegetation covered land does not be get exclusively is heated because a great amount of insulation is used in is evaporating water from the plants. The next here, third point, relief and altitude. There is important relief features such as the mountain, plateaus and plain control the temperature by of the modified. It is a distribution. You know that the relief and the altitude. The mountain act as a barrier against the movement of wind. The mountain act a barrier. Okay, mountain act a barrier against the movement of winds. There, a Himalaya range is a prevent the cold wind of a Central Asia from entering the India during to winter. Because of this, Kolkata is not as cold as the Canton is a gasohol and the winter through the both are situated almost on the same altitude. It is important here. As we move upward from a sea level, we experience a gradually decrease in a temperature. Temperature decrease at the average rate of 6 Celsius per 1000 meter altitude. It is known as a normal lapse rate. The air at a lower evaporation is a warmer than that is a higher elevation of because it is a closest to be a heated surface of a earth. As a result, mountains are cooler than to the plain even during to the summer. As a result, mountains are cooler and they are plain even during to summer, and it is a warm is remembering to that is a rate of decreasing of temperature with altitude. The varies with the time of the day and season and the location. Here show the diagram. There is the most important here effect of the altitude on temperature. You know that there is the most important diagram show and the map also show in this effect of the altitude of temperature. The rising altitude of temperature here and they are increasing. The area is also is increasing on this time. Is an important diagram show in this two figure. The Quito and the Guayaquil are two cities of the equator in South America and situated near the equator and relative to close to each other. And Quito is at a 2,800 meters. The high from mean sea level with the Guayaquil is just at a 12 meters altitude. However, because of difference in altitude and Quito experience annual mean to the temperature of 13.3 Celsius, while the Guayaquil is the 25.5 Celsius. Is important here. The next here, ocean currents. They are most important ocean currents here. The ocean currents are two types, is a warm and cold. The ocean current is a two types, warm and cold. The warm current make the coastal along with their flow of warmer, and the well there is a cold current is reduce the temperature of the coastals along with their flow. The northwestern European and coastal do not have freezes in the winter due to the effect of the northern altitude and drafty of warm current. While the Quebec is on the coastal of the Canada is freezing due to the cold Labradors is a current flowing along it is through the Quebec and the situated is a lower altitude than the northern west Europe coastal. There is the most important air figure. Here show the map effect of warm and cold ocean current. There is the most important show the arrow, the Gulf Stream and northern altitude of draft and a warm coastal. And the lower is the current is a cold coastal. There is the most important here of wind effect on the all of the world. There is an important diagram show in this picture. The next here, winds. The wind is also is important here. The wind also affect to temperature because they transport heat from one region to other, about which you have already studied under advocation. The wind is the most important affect the temperature because transport heat from one region to other. And the next year, vegetation cover. The vegetation cover is the most important here. The soil dry to the vegetation cover receive heat more rapidly than the soil under to vegetation cover because vegetation cover absorb much of the sun as a heat and then prevent a quick radiation from the earth, whereas to the farmers radiate it is a more rapidly. Hence the temperature is a variation in the dense forested area are lower than those the desert area. You know that vegetation cover is the most important effect here on the temperature. The vegetation cover is the most important. You know that there is a desert area is a no plant and there is a very low dense. And the temperature variation in the dense forest is the area the lower than to the heat is a desert area. For example, annual range of temperature in the equator region about 5 Celsius will their hotter desert is as high as 38 Celsius. The next here, nature of the soil. There is an important here. The color, texture and structure of the soil is a modified temperature to a great degree. There is a black, yellow and clayey soil absorb to more heat than the sandy soil. It is important here. The color, texture and structure of the soil modifies the temperature to great degrees. The black, yellow and the clay soil absorb to the more heat than to the sandy soil. And like view, the heat is radiated more rapidly from their sandy soil than from to the black, yellow and clay soil. And there is temperature contrasts are relatively less in a black soil area than those of the sandy soil. The next here, slope and ascent. There is an important here. The angle of the slope and its direction control the recept of the insolation. The angle of the incidence of sun as a ray is a greater along a gently slope and smaller along a steeper slope. The ray is of both the cases is a carry on equal amount of solar energy. The great concentrations of solar energy is a per unit area along to the gently slope areas in the temperature. Well, it is a lesser concentration along the steeper slope and the lower their temperature. For such a reason, the southern slope of the Himalaya are warmer than to the northern one. Yet sometimes the slope in the term of a sap exposed to the sun is received the more insolation and are the warm than those which are the away from the direct ray of the sun. And you know, the northern slope of Himalaya, for example, not the function of sun, are the exposed to be cold. Northerly is the wind, are the absorbly is cold. And on the other hand, is the southern floor of the Himalaya are sun facings, and also is a setter from the northerly cold winds are warmer. This is important, and hence we are absorbed settlement and cultivation largely on the southern slope of their Himalaya, while the northern slope are more under forest area. There is an important point here. Land and the sea contrast leaf attitude, oceans, crane and wind vegetation cover nature of the soil. Slope and the sap their control their contribution of temperature in the world. The horizontal distribution of temperature over the globes can be studied easily from the map of January and July months. Since there is season extremely of the high and the low temperature most observed, there is both northern and southern hemisphere during this month is important here. And the next here, the first point here, horizontal distribution of temperature in January. That is important here. In January, there is sun sign of vertically as overhead near the topics of the Capricorn. Then it is a summer is the southern hemisphere and winter in the northern hemisphere. The high temperature is found over to the land masses is mainly in three regions of their southern hemisphere, and these regions are the northern west is a Agrarians in the east is a Central Africa and Central Australia. The isothermal of the 30 Celsius is close them. In the northern hemisphere, the land masses is colder than to the ocean. During this time, northern East Asia experience lowest temperature. As the air is the warm is over ocean than over the landmass. In the northern hemisphere, the isothermal bend to about the pole when they are across the oceans. In the southern hemisphere, the position of the isothermal is just reverse, and there is a bend toward to the pole when there is across the land masses and toward to the equator when there is across oceans. The large expanse of the water exist in the southern hemisphere, hence the isothermals are regular and widely spaced in the southern hemisphere. While there are a regular and closely spaced is a northern hemisphere. Due to large expanses of land masses, from this is a reason not extremely seasonal contrast between the land and water are the found in the middle and higher altitude in the southern hemisphere as the exit north of the equator. Here show the horizontal distribution of the here and there is a January May. There is a January season. There is the most important here distribution of the temperature here and the horizontal tree in the diagram. There is the most important. The next here horizontal distribution of temperature in a July. There is important here. During this period, the sun shines vertically overhead near to Tropic of Cancer. Here the high temperatures are found in the Antilles northern hemisphere. The isothermal of 30 Celsius pass between 10 is a northern and the 14 Celsius is a northern latitudes. The regions is having this temperature include southwestern USA, the Sahara, the Arabia and Iraq, Iran and the Afghanistan desert region of India and China. However, lowest temperature of 0 Celsius are also noticed in the northern hemisphere during the summer in the center part of the Greenland. And during summer in the northern hemisphere, isotherms bend to the equator ward and while the crossing the oceans and polar ward while they are crossing land masses. In a southern hemisphere, the position of the isotherm is just opposite. Here show the diagram, the horizontal distribution of temperature on July. The July there is a temperature on the map, there is a change of the sequence. There is a most important. Compared to the Jan and the July, there is a more difference. On this figure, there is important so in this picture. Land usually went to the rather the sharply to avoid to the pole in the winter and to avoid the equator in the summer. And this behavior of the isothermal is due to the differential of heating and cooling of the land masses. And the continent are the hotter in the summer and the colder in the winter than the oceans. The difference between the average temperature of the is a warmest and the coldest is a month is known as the annual range of temperature. Annual range of temperature is larger in the interior part of the continent in a middle and the high altitude of the northern hemisphere. The barometers and Cervaria is code of 66 Celsius temperature is the highest. The 66 Celsius temperature is the very highest annual range of temperature in the world. It is the lowest average winter temperature is minus 50 Celsius. Hence, it is applicable to call to cold pole of the earth. There is a minus 50 Celsius is a very low temperature and 66 Celsius is the highest temperature. The difference between the average temperature of the warmest and the coldest month is known as the annual range of temperature. The important here, the difference between the average temperature of the warmest and the coldest month is known as the annual range of temperature. There is the most important here. The next here, vertical distribution of temperature. There is important here. The permanent snow on the high mountain even to the tropical indicates there is a decreasing of temperature with the altitude. Observation reveals that there is a fairly regular decrease in temperature with on increasing in the altitude. The average rate of temperature decrease upward in the troposphere in about 6 Celsius per kilometer, extending the troposphere. This is a vertical gradient of temperature is commonly referred to as the standard atmosphere or normal is a lapse rate, but is a various with the height and season, altitude and hour factor. Indeed, their active is a lapse rate of the temperature does not be away so as a decrease with the altitude is important here. And the next here, The inversion of temperature, there is a important here. Long winter night, the clear sky, dry air and absence of the wind lead to quick radiation of heat from the earth as a surface, as well as from to the lower layer of the atmosphere. This result is the cooling of the air near the earth as a surface. The upper layer, which is a lose their heat not so quickly or comparatively is warm. Another normal condition in which the temperature decrease with increasing the high is a reserves. The cooler air is near the earth and the warm air is there alpha. In other words, the temperature increasing with the increasing and the high temporarily is locally. And this phenomenon is termed to the inversion of temperature. At the same time, the cold and dense air is remain near the surface of the number of day. So there is phenomenon of the inversion of temperature is also seen for the day together. The phenomenon of the inversion of the temperature is especially observed in the intermountains of valley. During the winter, the mountain slope cold is very rapidly due to quick radiation of heat. The air resting above them is also become a cold and dense increasing. Then it is a move down to the slope and settles down in the valley, and this air is a pulses is a comparatives is a warm air of the valley upward and the lead to be a phenomenon as a versions of temperature, and sometimes the temperature fall below to the freezing point in the valley, leading to even there is a occurrence of the frost. And frost is there is important. In a contrast, the higher slope remain to the comparative warmer. That is why the mulberries is a planter of Sava basin of Japan and the apple growers of the Himachal Pradesh avoid the lower slope of the mountain to escape winter frost. If you have been to any hill stations, you would be has been to that most of the holiday they stored and the houses of the affluent persons and built on the upper slope. There is a most important.